All right, so today we're going to dive into a fascinating interview with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay.
You know, just the name itself, right? It kind of conjures images of like peak athletic performance, right?
Absolutely.
He's on a global stage, and today, you know, for your deep dive, we're going beyond just like the highlight reels.
Right.
We're gonna really get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
You shared some excerpts from his recent interview on the WOPAP podcast, and our mission here is really clear.
Yeah.
To extract those essential insights from him, his journey, his mindset, and his training.
Right.
You know, and how we can apply those to our own understanding of high performance.
Yeah.
So consider this like your shortcut to absorbing the wisdom of, you know, a true competitor, a legend in the game.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this interview is, super fascinating because we often just see the result. Like we see Ronaldo scoring amazing goals, winning all these trophies.
Yeah.
But here we get a glimpse into like the foundational elements of his success.
Yeah.
The early influences, the daily disciplines, and the data-driven approach that he uses.
Right.
To really underpin this remarkable career that he's had.
Exactly.
And so I think this is a great way to really understand the how behind the what. We're going to get into that.
Totally. So let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
So he talks about his very first, experiences with football, just kind of kicking it around.
Yeah.
He said that was around the ages of 7 or 8, playing in the street with his friends.
Yeah.
It just sounds like, it was pure enjoyment back then. Just,
Oh, totally.
Love of the game.
Absolutely. And he describes it as his first love, emphasizing the fun.
Yeah.
The simple pleasure of the game. At that age, he was just a kid. The idea of becoming a professional footballer or even like a global superstar just wasn't on his radar.
Right.
He was just having fun, playing with his friends.
Right.
And I think that's such a crucial starting point. Just having that inherent love for the activity itself.
Yeah.
It's that intrinsic motivation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it seems that, that early passion that he had was definitely nurtured by some key people in his life.
Right.
Especially his father.
Absolutely. His father was a huge influence on him, recognizing his talent early on and, encouraging him to go out there and pursue it.
Yeah.
And really pushed him to join, a local club called Andorinha in Madeira. And it's interesting. Andorinha actually means swallow in English.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's the bird. And
that's kind of cool.
I know, right?
Little tidbit there.
Yeah, a little symbol.
Yeah. And beyond his father, he really acknowledged, the important roles that his mother and brothers played in his development as well.
Yes.
And so it wasn't just about like athletic training, it was about having a supportive family environment that helped him grow.
Right. And, when you look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, the debate always inevitably comes up about talent versus work ethic. Is it nature or nurture? He's clearly both, right?
Yeah.
But he offers his own perspective on this, and it's kind of a balanced view, I would say.
Yeah, it's fascinating because what's really compelling is his belief that neither exists effectively in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
He says talent without work is nothing, and work without talent is nothing too.
Yeah.
And he uses his own experience, his own success, 20 years at the highest level,
right,
as proof that he's got, he's put in the work,
right,
that he's relentless, know. And so I think for somebody listening, who may not consider themselves like the most naturally gifted person in their field, this should be really encouraging because it really underscores the power of consistent effort over a long period of time.
Right. And so after achieving so much, right, I mean, he's won so many awards. He's one of the best in the world. What continues to drive him?
Right.
What fuels that legendary work ethic? Because he's known for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he cites a few key motivators for that.
Okay.
One is just the enjoyment that he gets from playing the game.
Okay.
He still loves it.
Yeah.
Second is the desire to make people happy, to make his fans happy and make his family proud.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third is just that competitive spirit that he has.
Right.
He always wants to challenge himself,
right.
be at the highest level.
Yeah. And
so it's really this combination of internal passion and external factors that keep him going.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, his journey to the top wasn't, it wasn't a smooth ride. It wasn't without its challenges. And he mentions an early sacrifice he made, that really highlights his level of commitment.
Yeah.
And how much he really wanted this.
Well, I mean, moving from his home in Madeira to Lisbon at just 11 years old,
Right.
to chase this dream, to become a professional football player. He said that was the most difficult part of his entire career.
Wow.
Imagine like leaving your family
at 11.
At 11 years old.
No, that's huge.
And, he talks about it, and you can just hear how much of an emotional toll it took on him.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to the incredible courage and determination that he had, even at that young age.
To just follow his dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And even now, as an established icon, right?
Yeah.
He's gotten to the mountaintop, but he still faces hurdles in maintaining that position.
Oh, absolutely. And he talks about, it's an ongoing challenge to stay at the top of his game.
Right.
Especially when you've got all these, younger, really talented players coming up.
Right. They're always nipping at your heels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for him, it's about constantly committing to not just physical training, but also mental resilience and this ability to adapt to the game as it changes around him.
So this kind of brings us to his adoption of technology, right?
Yeah.
And data, especially, his use of WO, he's been wearing a whip band for a long time.
Yeah.
It seems to be, more than just a gadget to him.
For sure. I mean, he talks about it with so much conviction.
Right.
It's like deeply integrated into his routine now.
Yeah.
He discovered WO a few years ago, and he describes it as, it's like having a doctor on your wrist.
Right.
That's a powerful statement.
Right.
And he says, very clearly, I cannot live without W.
Wow. And
that's because he's feeling these tangible benefits in his physical health, his mental well-being, his sleep quality. And just to put an exclamation point on that, he's got a 95% compliance rate.
Wow.
Over 646 days of use. So that means like almost every single day.
Yeah.
For 2 years, he's been using this.
That's a testament to how much he believes in it.
It really is.
Yeah. So that consistent use, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he must generate a ton of data. What are some of the key insights that he's been able to glean from that?
Well, the data is really impressive.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, his resting heart rate averages 43 beats per minute.
Wow.
That's insanely low.
Yeah.
That puts him in the top 1% of men on the entire WOPI platform.
Wow.
And the top 3% of pro athletes.
That's amazing.
I mean, so his cardiovascular system is incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
And that's just years and years of training, right?
Yeah.
But in addition to that, he averages an 81% sleep performance.
Yeah.
Which is also incredibly impressive.
Especially when you consider, I'm sure he's got a crazy high strain, right?
Exactly. He has a crazy high strain.
Yeah.
He averages 14.9 out of 21.
Oh, my God.
Which is a huge amount of daily strain.
Right.
But what's really remarkable is that even with that level of strain, he spends 51% of his days in the green recovery zone.
Wow.
So just to clarify, strain is the overall demand placed on his body.
Okay.
And the green recovery zone is like his body's ability to bounce back and prepare for more.
Got it.
So the fact that he can be in that zone, over half the time with that kind of strain, really speaks to his longevity.
Yeah, so that level of recovery is just crucial. With such intense training, and when asked about, what's the map to recovery?
Yeah.
What's the secret sauce? What's the formula?
Right.
His answer is really interesting. It's not what I would have guessed.
Yeah, he really emphasizes discipline as the most important thing.
Okay.
And he calls it the most challenging aspect, not just in sports, but in life.
Yeah.
He tracks 43 different things in his WWOOP journal. Like, it's amazing. He's tracking his carbs, he's tracking turmeric, he's tracking zinc, caffeine, vitamin B, vitamin C, all these different things.
Yeah.
And he believes, the combination of all of that is what gives him, good nutrition.
So it's really about paying attention to every little detail.
It is. It's about being granular, being consistent. And it really speaks to the fact that even if you make these small changes to your lifestyle, if you track them, if you optimize them, it can have a huge impact on your performance.
Okay. Yeah.
You know?
That makes a lot of sense. And, it's one thing to have the knowledge, right?
Right.
Of what to do, but it's another thing to actually go out there and do it consistently.
Yeah.
Especially on those days where you're just not feeling it. Everybody has those days.
Right.
Where you just lack motivation.
Well, and he talks about that, He says there are days when he just doesn't feel like training or sticking to his routine.
Right.
And on those days, he says he has to fight against his mind.
Yeah.
To push through it, to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And, he acknowledges that, going to the gym every day, going through your routine, it's not always fun.
Right.
But he really understands that, there are long-term benefits to that consistent effort.
Yeah, and that's really like the definition of mental toughness, right?
Absolutely. It's the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, I like that. And so, beyond the nutrition tracking, he also incorporates a range of recovery methods into his routine, right? Like he's not just working out, he's making sure that he's also taking care of his body.
Right. Well, so he does a lot of massage therapy. He does a lot of cold exposure, cold showers, cold plunges, sauna, steam. He's got this whole protocol.
Right.
And it's interesting because he's documented taking cold showers on 208 days.
Wow.
And he does some kind of recovery modality 35% of the time.
Okay.
But the thing is, he used to see these things as a sacrifice.
Right.
But now he actually enjoys them.
Wow.
He sees them as part of his daily life, and that's really interesting, that shift.
It's like they're not a chore anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're just part of who he is.
And he's seeing those benefits.
Exactly.
So speaking of daily life, he shared, a little bit about his morning routine, which sounds, just incredibly structured and intentional.
Structured. He describes himself as an animal of routines.
Okay.
And he says about 90% of his days follow the same pattern. Yeah, it's crazy.
So what does he do? What does that look like?
So he wakes up, he does a cold plunge.
Okay.
First thing in the morning.
Wow.
Hydrates, takes a shower, gets some sunlight for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Has some coffee, and spends time with his family.
Nice.
He's connecting with them before he starts his day.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? Because, we're talking about peak performance.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the physical, right? It's about the mental as well.
Right.
So I'm curious, given the intense mental demands of, elite competition.
Yeah.
Does he do any mindfulness practices? Does he meditate?
Well, it's interesting. He doesn't actually have a daily meditation practice.
Oh.
However, he does use breathing techniques.
Okay.
Especially to lower his heart rate and calm his nerves before big moments, like free kicks, penalty kicks.
Right, yeah.
And he says he's really honed that skill through repetition and training.
So it's kind of like meditation?
Kind of like meditation. Yeah. He's using his breath as a tool.
Yeah, as a way to control his mental state.
Exactly.
Yeah, and sounds like mental visualization is a big part of his preparation as well.
Oh, huge. He visualizes all sorts of different scenarios in his mind.
Wow.
That might happen during a game, and he's even, predicted certain events.
Oh, really?
Like penalties happening and stuff,
No.
And he's even told friends about it.
No way.
Like before a match.
And then it happened.
Yeah, and then it happened. That's
amazing. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. So finally, let's discuss his partnership with WOP.
Okay.
It's more than just an endorsement deal.
Right.
He's an investor. He's a global ambassador.
Yeah.
So clearly he really believes in it. So what do you think motivated that deeper level of involvement?
He really believes in the product, He sees it as a fantastic tool, and it's something that he feels has contributed to his own improvement.
Yeah.
Both as an athlete and a person, right? Yeah.
And he also likes that the company's growing. And he's aligned with their mission, which is to empower people to understand their bodies.
Yeah.
And optimize their performance through data,
So his personal experience was so positive.
Exactly.
That he's like, okay, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of this.
Exactly.
So as we kind of conclude this deep dive into, Ronaldo's approach to high performance, what are some of the key themes that we've seen emerge here?
Well, I think, we can't overstate the importance of having that early passion.
Yeah.
That he had for the game. And he had a family that really supported him.
Right. A good support system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the talent is there.
Right.
But the work ethic,
it goes hand in hand.
You got to have both.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah. And he also talked about, some pretty significant sacrifices he had to make along the way.
Yeah, leaving his family at 11 years old,
Yeah, that's huge.
That's a huge sacrifice.
And then, even once you reach the top, there's still challenges
to
staying there.
Absolutely.
And obviously using tools like WP have been huge for him.
Right, having that data.
Getting that data, yeah. And then,
And using it.
Yeah, and then, he touched on having consistent daily routines, mental preparation techniques.
Yes.
All of those things are really important.
And underpinning all of that is that word, discipline.
Yeah. Right.
He keeps coming back to that.
Yeah, that seems to be like...
Which I think is so key, because
key.
It's not enough to just know what to do.
Yeah.
You have to have the willpower to actually do it.
Right. You have to consistently execute.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's something that everyone listening can relate to.
Absolutely.
Right. It's like we all have goals, we all have things we want to achieve, but it's like having that mental fortitude to actually see it through is really the separator. Yeah, and it really makes you think, right?
It does.
When you consider like the level of discipline it takes to maintain peak performance.
Yeah.
In any field, right? It doesn't even have to be sports.
Yeah.
It could be music, it could be business.
Anything.
You know, whatever you're striving for, you know, for them, he's done it for 2 decades. That's incredible.
It's incredible.
You know, so what are those small habits, right?
Right.
That we can implement in our own lives, you know, consistently.
Yes.
That might lead to, you know, big results down the line.
Right.
That's the question to ask yourself.
That's the question, I think.
You know, what are those things that you can do every single day?
Right.
Even when you don't feel like it, that will get you to where you want to be.
Exactly.
So that's something to think about, you know, long after our deep dive concludes.
Yeah.